Manasseh was the son of King Hezekiah, born into a palace where no idols remained, after Hezekiah destroyed every idol. As a boy, he was taught to pray facing the temple, to bow his head before meals, to recite the words his father recited every morning before the sun had fully risen. Each year during the feast, his father walked him by the hand through the temple courts, stopping to explain what each offering meant and why the altar stood where it stood. His father took him as a small child to watch the priests at the altar, lifting him onto his shoulders so he could see over the heads of the crowd gathered in the courts of the Lord. No one around him thought twice about the silent prince. They believed they were watching the son of a faithful king grow into a faithful man. Instead, they were watching Judah's darkest chapter quietly begin. Hezekiah ruled Judah for many years, tearing down every high place where the nations once burned incense to gods that were not the Lord, smashing the carved images his own forefathers had set up across the hills. He trusted the Lord even when the army of Assyria camped outside the walls of Jerusalem itself. Manasseh grew up inside the years that followed that victory, walking the same halls his father walked, watching him kneel before the Lord in the same room every evening before he slept, never knowing what he would one day become. But Hezekiah grew sick, and then he grew old, and then he died, and the crown of Judah was placed on the head of his son. Manasseh was 12 years old the day he sat down on his father's throne for the first time. At first, the people of Judah did not know what kind of king they had been given. But it did not take long to find out. A group of officials came to the young king. These were men who had served under Hezekiah, but had buried their old gods in the ground, rather than burn them the way the king had once commanded. They stood before Manasseh and spoke carefully, choosing their words. "Your father tore down what our fathers built. The nations around us still worship freely. Why should Judah alone go without idols?" One of the older men leaned in further. "You are young. No one expects you to carry the same burden your father carried. Let the people have back what was taken from them." Manasseh listened to them in silence for a long while. Then he called for his builders. "Rebuild the high places my father tore down. Raise the altars again on every hill." Workers went out across the kingdom carrying tools and stone. They found the broken altars his father had smashed apart, lying scattered in the hill country, and they lifted the stones back into place one on top of another until the altars stood as tall as they once had. New altars rose beside the old ones in the valleys and outside the gates of every town in Judah. Smoke began climbing into the sky again, smoke from offerings burned to Baal. Manasseh called for craftsmen and had them carve a wooden image of Asherah, tall and smooth, polished until it gleamed in the lamplight. When it was finished, he did not send it out to some distant shrine. He had it carried through the streets of Jerusalem, through the gates of the temple, and set down inside the very house his father had once swept clean. Priests who still served the Lord in that same building watched it carried past them and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say to a king who would not listen. At night, Manasseh climbed to the roof of his palace and looked up at the stars scattered across the sky. He bowed low before them and called for altars to be built inside the temple courts for the sun, the moon, and all the host of heaven, set up in the very same courts where the priests once burned incense to the Lord alone. He called for mediums next, men who claimed they could speak with the dead, and let them into his own palace. One of them knelt before him in a small chamber thick with smoke and said, "Ask me, and the spirits of the dead will answer through my mouth." Manasseh leaned forward and asked him to call up the dead so he could learn what was coming. He called for sorcerers too, men who read the future in the entrails of animals. Manasseh listened to every word they spoke. Whether their answers were lies or empty promises, he believed them more than the voice of the Lord. And Manasseh became a grown man. But as he grew older, his heart only drifted farther from the Lord. There was a valley just outside the walls of Jerusalem, where fires burned day and night, fires lit for a god called Molech. Manasseh walked down into that valley himself one evening, leading his own young son by the hand. The priests there built the fire high. Manasseh lifted his son and gave him to the flames. The same act the nations before him had once done in that same valley. The very practice the Lord had driven those nations out of the land for doing. The Lord did not stay silent through any of this.
Before we continue, these videos takes hours and hours to make. If you could, please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.
He sent his prophets into the streets of Jerusalem to speak against what the king had done.
Hear the word of the Lord! Repent, for judgment is at hand! Turn from your ways!
Because of this, the Lord will bring such disaster on Jerusalem that everyone who hears of it will be stunned. Manasseh ordered the man brought before him.
You dare stand before me?
The prophet did not lower his eyes. I bring no curse of my own, I only speak what the Lord has given me to speak. Manasseh's anger did not cool. Take him away, let him speak no more. From that day forward, anyone who spoke against the king or tried to turn the people back to the Lord was hunted down through the streets and silenced. So much blood was spilled across Jerusalem in those years that it was said to have filled the city from one end to the other. This part of the story is written in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 21. But what Manasseh did not know, sitting on his throne surrounded by carved idols and a silenced people, was that far to the east, beyond the rivers and beyond the mountains, a mighty empire was already watching the smaller kingdoms around it grow weak from within. Assyria had not forgotten Judah, and the day was coming when the Lord would use that very empire as the hand of his judgment against the king who had refused every warning sent to him. One of the most interesting parts of Manasseh's life began on a morning that started out like any other in Jerusalem. Merchants opening their stalls, farmers leading their animals through the gates, children running between the carts on their way to the well. But before the sun had climbed halfway across the sky, riders came down the northern road at a hard gallop, shouting as they passed through the gates. The army of Assyria has crossed into Judah. Their commanders are marching straight toward Jerusalem. Manasseh called his officials and commanders into the palace hall. Gather every man who can carry a weapon. Close the gates. We will not bow to Assyria. Soldiers ran through the streets, banging on doors, calling out, Men of Judah, take up your weapons! The king commands us to stand! Men grabbed spears and shields from inside their homes and ran for the walls. The gates were sealed shut with heavy beams, and watchmen climbed the towers to count the enemy gathering in the distance. The Assyrian army moved across the land like a flood, town after town falling under their advance, breaking through one outer defense after another until their commanders surrounded Jerusalem on every side. The fighting inside the city did not last long. Assyrian soldiers broke through the gates and stormed the palace, dragging Manasseh out from behind his own throne. His royal robes were torn off. Outside the walls, the soldiers forced him down onto his knees, drove a sharp hook through his nose, and bound his wrists with heavy bronze shackles. Then they tied a rope to the hook and pulled him forward, leading him out through the gates of Jerusalem and onto the long road east toward Babylon. For many days, Manasseh walked that road, crossing dry plains under the sun. The soldiers stopped at wells along the way to drink their fill while he waited in the dirt with his wrists still bound. At night they tied him to a post and let him sleep on the bare ground. Children in the small villages they passed ran to the roadside just to see the captive king of Judah stumble by with a rope through his nose. They crossed a wide river on a narrow bridge of timber, the soldiers laughing as they shoved him forward, and continued through flat farmland dotted with date palms until the towering gates of Babylon rose up in the distance. Inside the city, they marched him through crowded streets past temples built to gods he did not know, and shut him inside a prison built deep into the city wall. In that cell, with no throne, no crown, and no idols left to call out to, Manasseh thought back to his father kneeling in prayer inside the very palace he himself had filled with foreign altars. He thought of the mediums who could not loosen a single chain, the sorcerers who could not tell him how many days he had left. Night after night, alone in the dark, he lowered his head and prayed, "Lord God of my fathers, I have sinned against you. I have filled this land with idols and filled its streets with innocent blood. But if you will hear me even now, I will never turn from you again." This part of the story is recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 33. Word eventually came down through the Babylonian court that the captive king of Judah was to be released. Guards unlocked the shackles from his wrists and pulled the hook from his nose. A horse was brought for him, the first kindness shown to him in a long time. Manasseh climbed onto it and rode out through the gates of Babylon. When he reached the gates of his own city, the people gathered to see their king return. He did not go first to his throne. He walked straight to the temple of the Lord, and with his own hands he tore down the carved image and ordered it carried out beyond the walls. He turned to his officials.
Every pagan altar on the hills of Judah must be destroyed.
It will be done, my lord.
Go now, purify the land.
Workers went out across the kingdom, smashing apart what Manasseh himself had once ordered built. He gathered builders and had the outer wall of the city of David rebuilt and strengthened, stretching it from the spring of Gihon up to the western hill. He sent commanders to take charge of the fortified cities across Judah and stationed soldiers in each one, so the kingdom would never again be caught as undefended as it had been the day Assyria marched through unopposed. He reigned 55 years on the throne of Judah, longer than any king before him, from the day he was crowned at 12 years old until the day he died. He was buried in the garden of his own palace, the same garden where he had once burned incense to gods. His son Amon took the throne after him. But Amon had never walked that road to Babylon. Amon sat on the throne of Judah for only 2 years before his own officials turned against him inside his own palace and ended his life there.
Do you want to learn how to make these videos? Go to my YouTube page and watch the member-only video. I provide all the prompts I use, tools I use, and how I animate. These videos takes hours and hours to make. If you could, please like and subscribe and comment which country you are watching this from.